Okay, now we've completed what we need for calorie calculations, let's dive into protein requirements. And protein, as we all know, is probably it is the most important macronutrient in any nutrition plan, especially for anyone who wants to improve their body composition or is active. We know what it's responsible for and where it's involved in muscle growth, fat loss, and all that. So let's look at some of the more detailed reasons why we need to get it right for our clients. So first one is muscle protein synthesis, which is the process by which the body repairs and builds muscle. Our bodies are in a constant push-pull of protein synthesis and protein breakdown. And for us to grow muscle, get bigger, get stronger, get better body composition, synthesis needs to outweigh our catabolic processes of breakdown. So it's really important that we do that for our clients. Now, that being said, I'm approaching that with a bias of clients who do want to build muscle and improve their body composition like that. For normal health markers, it's not going to be that big a deal. Okay, so looking at the lower range of the protein intake will actually do that, but we'll go through that as well. Okay, so general recommendation is 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight, and this can go all the way down to 0.8 for clients who are not active at all, and all the way to 3.4, 3.6 for people who are trying to really maximize nitrogen retention, which is protein retention and muscle growth. But for most people, 1.6 to 2.2 is the kind of sweet spot where it allows you to have a greater diversity of foods in the diet in terms of carbohydrate and fat sources, because the majority of someone's caloric intake isn't taken up by protein. Now, from here, we know that protein, for example, we talked about in the last one, thermic has the highest thermic effect, which is 15 to 30% of its caloric value can be used in digestion and processing. So a high protein diet does make fat loss diets more effective because you are getting the food, but you are burning it off as part of that. So let's just say you're lucky and you burn 30% off of all your protein. If you're eating 200 grams of protein, you're essentially burning off 60 grams of protein at that higher mark there. That 60 grams of protein is another 240 calories, because protein has 4 calories per gram. That basically is, you don't have to burn in any other way. So that is contributing to a caloric deficit. Again, it's not something I would be talking to my clients about to encourage them to overeat protein to achieve that. Consistency will be more important there, but it's something to be used when necessary for our clients. We know protein is very satiating, which keeps you fuller for longer, so reduces hunger, which means adherence becomes better. Because the most challenging thing about diets is hunger. Simple as that. And if we increase protein intake, both in frequency and in size, we are less likely to do that. And that's one thing that we'll talk about, the protein frequency argument. So for fat loss, cool. We want a high protein intake to preserve lean muscle mass during a caloric deficit. Now, if we train hard enough with a big enough stimulus, we can still build muscle in the caloric deficits with a decent amount of protein. Okay, so we really want to look at the higher end, 2 to 2.2 to really up to 3.5 grams based on the person. The methods of 2.2 will be safe for pretty much all clients. When you're taking a client above 3 grams, you want to be sure that they're drinking enough water, they've got good kidney health, and they would be a pretty serious client by that point. Now for hypertrophy, not as much, okay, because carbohydrate will help drive it a lot of the time, particularly in a surplus. But I would still keep that protein around that 2 grams simply because it's a really easy constant to calculate. If they're on 80 kilos of body weight, 160 grams of protein, really easy to work out, and you can ensure that your clients will have muscle protein synthesis outweighing catabolic processes. Now, for heavy clients, this is something that needs to be just addressed. If you calculate protein based on the current body weight, it can be really, really high. So if someone's, let's say, 200 kilos and we give them 2 grams per kilo body weight, and that does happen, that's 400 grams of protein a day, which is a lot. And these clients are probably in a state where their kidney health is slightly compromised anyway. So I would calculate their protein requirements based on goal body weight and adjust based on a more realistic target, because we don't want to give them an impractical protein consumption level, and it's probably going to be more detrimental than it is healthy for that person. Now, with timing and protein is one of those things that needs to be distributed evenly across the day. Okay, with carbohydrates, we can bias them around the workout time, because then we can take advantage of their ability to improve performance and also improve recovery. And we can bias fats away from the workout to basically help us have more food in those meals and be a little bit more balanced. Okay, Now, with protein, generally the best recommendation we can give is 4 meals per day with an equal protein distribution. That will maintain a steady supply of aminos. It will reduce the chance of muscle protein breakdown. It is ideally the best way to do it. Now, in some situations, it's not always going to work. So, for example, if you have a client that trains at 6 a.m. and they simply can't eat or even drink a protein shake before a workout because it just makes them too sick, don't worry about too much. It's not going to be the end of the world. It's not going to destroy their results. If they have a protein meal before going to bed, they've still got adequate circulating amino acids in their bloodstream to make sure they don't go catabolic throughout the workout. In fact, you want to go slightly catabolic. So I wouldn't stress about it in a workout. What you can do is have some essential amino acids during a workout if they can stomach that with some electrolytes, and now take care of that problem. And that's only if a client is struggling to improve in their training performance. So what a lot of coaches will do is they'll look at this protein intake and they'll look at it in a vacuum. They'll look at it in an isolated thing where this is the only thing that matters. And if we have a client, for example, who trains at 6 a.m., doesn't eat until 8 o'clock, so they're not hitting that protein, and they eat 3 times a day, they're having a bigger protein meal, so they're not getting 4 servings. Some people will look at that and be like, oh, that client's doing it wrong. But if that client is improving their lifts, if they're getting stronger and they feel more recovered, guess what? They're in a good place, and it's nothing that you need to worry about. For the vast majority of our clients, we need to simplify and not overcomplicate this. Okay? A lot of strategies used in high-end physique sports, when applying them to our general population clients, are a bad idea. Okay? Simply because people can't do that. It's not practical. So with pre and post workout protein as well, before and after is generally ideal if you can, but again, doesn't mean you have to slam down a protein shake immediately post workout. Again, if you've had a protein meal 1 to 2 hours beforehand, if someone's really, really focused on optimal muscle, if they can't eat immediately post workout, they're not going to die. So it's okay. Now, with proteins, we need to differentiate between complete and incomplete amino acids. Proteins are made up of amino acids, and not all of these are equal. We have complete and incomplete proteins. So a complete protein is one that contains all 9 essential amino acids that the body cannot make on its own. So we can make amino acids, but we can't make these 9 amino acids. And we find these sources, all animal-based foods that do that. And there's 2 sources of plant-based food that work, which are quinoa and soy. But in general, animal-based proteins are going to be more complete and easier to actually break down and use in the body. Now, with incomplete proteins, they're missing 1 or more of the essential amino acids, which means they offer benefits, but they don't provide the full spectrum of amino acids needed. And these are going to be most plant-based foods, such as legumes, grains, nuts, and seeds. And what a lot of people do is they combine them, because what happens, one food, say rice, will have an amino acid that's not contained in grains or seeds, for example. And combining them to one meal means that you actually get the complete amino acid sequence in there. So this is important to be aware of when you have clients that are plant-based, so vegetarians or vegans, because they need to do that to get the complete proteins. Now, if anyone says a vegan or plant-based athlete can't gain muscle, they're totally wrong. It does require more planning for them, and that's totally okay. We just need to be aware of that and do that. So with protein, there's a little bit of a summary here. I'm sure we all understand it. Our takeaways are anywhere from 1.6 to 2.2. Most of the time is going to be really, really good for the clients. I generally recommend about 2 grams per kilo body weight for most people as a starting point. And from there, you know that you're going to tick all your boxes. One last thing that you can do with protein as well, with a client who is really adherent. Okay, if this is a really adherent client, or you may find it useful for yourself. Everyone has a particular threshold with every macronutrient. Micronutrient works best for them. So for some people, you can actually escalate that up a little bit, 2.2, 2.4, 2.6, until you find the point where they're performing and working really well, and going above that leads to a detriment. Again, same thing going down the other way as well, like 2.2 to 2 to 1.2, etc. It's a little bit more complex and takes a little bit longer, but for most people, you'll find an ideal point where they feel really, really happy and really, really good in the diet. So if you have a client that's got consistency and is willing and open to experiment with that, is a really good use of your time, because then you can give them something that will last them for a long time. And this will happen with every micronutrient, every macronutrient, water, and anything that we consume. Thanks heaps, guys. I'll see you next one when we talk about carbohydrates.